Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello, Liv. Liv's here, and Liv, being Swedish, is actually quite timely. She may not be allowed here soon. No, obviously I'm exaggerating, but we're here actually to talk about the so-called Brexit, a hideous word which has been used to describe the British exit vote referendum from the European Union. In the past couple of weeks, or rather a couple of weeks ago, really, we had a referendum here, one person, one vote, on whether or not the UK should remain a member of the European Union community. Now, this community we've been a member of for around 40 years, and it was originally set up as an economic ideal, so like an ability to trade across Europe and make it easier, and essentially it was good for everyone, free market ideals.
Peace.
Exactly, yes, precisely. Promoting peace, yeah. The little things. But in the years since then, it has taken on a more of a political element, and lots of people in this country, for better or worse, I don't necessarily want to berate those people necessarily, for better or worse, feel that this sort of supranational identity is one which doesn't fit well with Britishness. And so the decision was taken, 52% to 48%, to leave the EU. Now this process will take a couple of years, but already we're starting to feel and see an impact in the realm of archaeology, and that's what we're here to talk about today. In general, the sciences in this country benefit to the tune of around 15% of overall funding from pots of money which are directly or indirectly affected by the European Union. But archaeology, it seems, is I suppose a bit more affected. It's weighted more towards 28%, and so this may have a big impact on everything, actually, even on Archaeo-Chat. So first of all, let's kick off. What about you guys? What do you think? What do we think is going to be or might be on the horizon as a result of this vote? How's it going to impact archaeology?
Lots of different things, but I guess one of the big problems that people have been talking about is how it's going to affect students and university courses. Because if you're studying archaeology or anthropology or whatever, a lot of the time you get to travel abroad. You get to travel into different parts of Europe through things like the Erasmus program, and you can do you get to do excavation or different types of field work there. And I think sometimes people get to go away and take like a year out of their course to a year working abroad. And it's kind of worrying a lot of students because, will we need special visas, or will we have to pay more like we're not already paying enough? There's just all sorts of things that it could affect us, and that's just one small thing. It's too much.
So that's sort of an immediate thought, and then actually you were saying the other day about how people from other countries, not just from within the UK, will be affected because, for example, in the realm of Vikings or Vikings, people want to come here to study, don't they?
Yeah.
And
to do like exchanges because, Viking or late Iron Age archaeology in Scandinavia has very much different results than it has in the UK, and to combine those two could give great insight to understand Viking travels and how the society worked on both ends of the seas.
So, for example, in a couple of days we're going to York.
Yeah.
And if someone wanted to study a Viking site in York from Sweden, it's going to be possibly or probably much more expensive to do that now.
And Chiara, it will affect you, being an EU.
I was thinking about it's just also, lots of countries in Europe, Central European mainland, don't have tuition fees that are comparable to the British one. So for me coming here, having these homeland fees is already quite a lot, and I imagine also lots of people could not even afford the overseas fees at all. And also it's just about, there's, for example, osteology is so great in Great Britain, and they have these amazing people who do that here, and lots of people travel to different countries because they are experts in specific fields in there. So you actually want to have that exchange, just not at a conference, but also to just study somewhere else where you know that the experts are, without bothering about visas, immensely high overseas fees, if you could get it cheaper, basically.
You would go elsewhere, yeah. Okay. Now, actually, it occurs to me that all of these are potentially whining. Oh, it's going to be more expensive. Now I'm saying that partly devil's advocate. The reason why I'm saying that is that, for example, students from the Far East, they already pay through the nose to come to study in Britain. And people in Britain who are pro-Brexit would say, well, actually, our universities sell themselves. We don't actually have to be part of the EU to get people to come here. Now, the reason why I'm saying, I don't necessarily agree with that, by the way, Chiara. I'm not shutting you down there. But what do you think, Jeanette, as someone from the US?
Yeah, I mean, I think the U.S. has a huge problem with university being incredibly expensive. So I would say that the impact is sure, people might still come from the EU. It's hard to know exactly. We still don't even know what's happening right now. A lot of this is sort of projected fear. So we might still have, our potential future archaeologists coming in to study in the UK and just shelling out more for it, but people who otherwise would, not have been able to afford an education, they will be boxed out. So especially in Scotland, I know if you're in the EU, you can get an undergraduate degree for free. You don't have to just be from Scotland. So if that changes, for example, that's going to be a pretty hard hit. In terms of sort of getting talented students from all over, they might not be willing to move to Scotland if it's going to cost them.
But also, actually, just before, Chiara, weren't you mentioning how there's also a potential impact in terms of the quality of the education that people can offer here because of access to other countries and their archaeology?
Well, I know that Durham University, as far as I've heard, for example, has in its first year not only the Roman fort in Binchester as a sort of teaching excavation, but they also excavating the Brexit in France, which then might cause problems. But I mean, nobody knows if it really is going to cause such problems. And Europe has sort of visa regulations with other countries as well, which are not like you need to apply and then all this stuff is happening. So I mean, but it's just like having the ability to travel everywhere. Well, not everywhere, but in a lot of countries without having visa problems is just good for excavations because you just can go somewhere and you don't have to worry if you're allowed to enter the country or there's like other stuff going on. And I think that's just a major change if you're not allowed to go or if you just have to stay in your country or to apply for a visa.
There's something that occurs to me that they never really show in the Indiana Jones films with the red line on the map. He doesn't have to stop and get a visa and then keep on. But okay, well, that's certainly one issue, and I think it's also an issue which actually lots of archaeologists, oddly enough, that's just to say the academic and funding and travel and this kind of thing is one which some archaeologists won't necessarily be most concerned by. Lots of archaeologists, for example, within the UK, are already hearing whispers of their jobs being severely renegotiated or lost. We're already hearing actually about I have someone who works in Northern Ireland, a friend who is hearing about colleagues having their names taken off research applications because having a Brit now is a dangerous thing for getting funding. It's one of those weird things where I mean that's an issue, but also we have on the ground the fact that also the building trade's going to suffer, and with no building, you don't get archaeology. It's one. I mean, what do we think that this is something which is just like a natural ebb and flow, or do you think this will archaeology just come back from this, or is this like a major change?
It depends on what happens during the Brexit. As Jeanette said, it's all very unclear at the moment what's happening and how it's going to happen and when it's going to happen and if it's going to happen. But if worst case scenario happens, I think it could affect both the building sector and hence archaeology severely because a lot of money comes the European way. And well,
for example, development funding.
Yeah. And I mean, archaeology jobs are hard to come by as they are. So even a small change should affect the industry or the sector quite a lot.
And I think it will at least, no matter what happens, temporarily slow down just because people don't know what's going to happen, so they're sort of already halting funding bids.
Yeah.
Like I have a friend, not necessarily in archaeology, but if it can happen in any science or in any project, like people are suddenly sort of their funding is being put on hold, like offers for postdocs are being rescinded now to UK individuals for EU funded programs because it's like, oh, we don't know what's going to happen, so we're not going to take the risk on you. We're just going to choose someone who's definitely going to be in the EU. So it's a shame, I think. But yeah, it's hard to know how long it will last or how bad it will be, but a lot of restructuring is going to need to occur before. So I think no matter what, the heritage sector is going to suffer, at least temporarily.
I mean, uncertainty is almost as dangerous as worst case scenario, because if people don't know what's going to happen, then they won't dare to chance on it.
I know even some people who are like not in archaeology, but they have EU funding for, well, it's a university in Scotland, but they have EU funding and they are starting in September, and they are now really concerned about whether they actually can even start their PhD because of, well, it's so unclear, although Scotland is like a bit of a different thing, but it's also related to people applying for European funded PhDs in other places where they are now not like, well, in theory it's assigned to this university, but will it still be there when I'm there as well, or will it still be there in a year? So
okay, well, I think we've explored that quite heavily, all these things. I suppose the question now is what can archaeologists, both those who are worried about their jobs, those who are aspiring anthropologists, God forbid, Jeanette. Sorry, Jeanette. I can read, but what can people do in this sort of context? Because one suspects, and this is one of the tremendous ironies, and this is obviously my own personal statement here. I'm not speaking for these guys. That lots of the people who voted Brexit. Who are at one end of the spectrum probably really like heritage and history. They like going to National Trust properties and they like engaging with the history of this country. And at the other end of the spectrum, there are people who voted Brexit to leave who just don't care about that stuff. But ultimately, the reality of it is that it may well actually impact on whether or not that there is even a viable and functioning heritage and archaeology sector in this country. Is the onus upon people now more than ever to actually try and educate people, to try and actually make people, if Britain is now sort of, going alone, making sure that actually that the sector itself, and also actually all of the, the sciences, academia in general, actually pulls its own weight, makes it very clear why it should be funded and why it deserves a portion of what will now be essentially, will be relying on our own GDP.
I think that's always should be the case. But yes, I think it's going to be more important than ever now. And also I think that those in the sectors and in academia kind of need to take like a deep breath, count to 10, try not to act out on this, because it's easy to panic. And panicking usually doesn't help.
Any other?
Also, I mean, I know a lot of anthropologists right now are just scrambling straight into this because it's, I mean, obviously scary for some of them, but also from an outsider perspective, it's sort of fascinating to try to sort of figure out why this is happening. And I mean, anthropologists don't really like to predict the future, but we like to document what is going on as it is going on, and figure out, I don't know, what is motivating people, what the conditions are which are motivating people, and I think that is more important now than ever too, because clearly, like, if a supposed majority really wants this, I think it's in our best interest to figure out why they want it and how to actually come to real practical solutions that will actually solve these problems. So yeah, I don't.
One suspects that for some that involves reinstating the British Empire, but
Yeah.
we'll put that to one side. But no, and actually you're quite right, because actually, obviously I'm sat in a room with a Swede. We have 2 international students here via Skype, and then we also have a young aspiring archaeologist who hasn't yet graduated. I mean, this stuff has such a visceral impact, and and at the moment it feels like, and ultimately this is also very much obviously a political issue. It feels like we've all been kind of left scrambling, trying to see what might be the case. I can't help but wonder whether or not actually what we need to really do is maybe treat this conversation that we're having as an opener, and maybe invite people at home, that's you guys, to comment and actually maybe add to this. So if you have, and obviously I know you're technically at home, and so am I technically, but you know what I mean if you're watching it. So actually contribute to this and actually maybe highlight some of the things which we're just not thinking about. I mean, it has been a traumatic couple of weeks, hasn't it? I mean, ultimately, it's not been easy. I think we're in a bit of a fog.
I mean, Mark has been ranting every day since I came here.
Yeah. I feel like this is a pretty biased group. I feel like we should probably have a little disclaimer. I don't
Yeah, we probably should.
Really in the leave camp.
But no,
like from outside, because I mean I'm sort of involved, but not directly, because ultimately I'm going to leave this country anyway in September. But it's just interesting to see how it all happens and changes all the time, and I think it's just a super interesting thing, although it's politically a bit chaotic and everything. But I think it's just so interesting to see something probably such important happening just in front of us, and we can be part of it somehow.
Yeah, well, and actually that's a great thing to try and tackle towards the end of this conversation today, is actually the fact that this is interesting. It is genuinely, potentially even exciting. If an actual positive expression of and growth of a more industrious academic community, more industrious country comes out of it, then potentially actually all these different the things that we're worried about may not actually be issues. I mean, for example, Jeanette, obviously you are from a country which doesn't rely on other countries to be industrious, to fund academia. Obviously, you have a vastly superior economy.
You have much bigger. Yeah.
But it wasn't one of those things where actually maybe this won't be the disaster that some people feel it is at the moment.
Maybe not.
I'm trying to be devil's advocate.
Depends how much you want me to argue with.
Some really pessimistic people for this chat.
I don't think it's pessimism. I think it's an understanding of how the global economy works, and I don't know, nationalism. This sort of really intense form of nationalism and closing up borders tends to not. It historically doesn't end very well.
Well, okay, I tried. I tried.
Look, I think it's worth saying, although driven by immense xenophobia and other such reasons, it is complicated. People voted for many reasons to leave the EU. I think mostly out of consideration for their families, for their personal economic conditions, and then people who made that decision truly believe that it is the best decision.
Now, and that is true, and also it's just worthwhile because I can almost feel people typing right now with that.
Yeah.
It's also worthwhile acknowledging that actually there is one end of the spectrum, certainly yes, usually towards, for example, I don't know, plumbers and builders, this kind of thing, a genuine economic concern about immigration. But we're straying into politics here, but it's worthwhile just hashing this out. But at the other end of that, actually, there is also a fairly good question that has to be answered about what exactly the political destination of the EU is. It's one of those things where I'm not saying that I completely think that's a great reason not to be involved and try and shape that that destination. But I think there are people who have voted with more than just a fear of other people. Some people have actually voted because they. I saw one person actually say that this has been a vote because the Brits truly love democracy. Now, that is from one perspective true, and there are people who would have voted because of that. So I'm not saying,
I mean, there are a lot. The EU has a lot of problems.
A lot.
Yeah.
There are a lot of not so great things about being involved with the EU, but I think for our little specific, in terms of how it's going to affect the heritage sector and how it's going to affect research of things, I think it at the moment seems quite negative.
Yeah.
But
I like the way it almost looks like you just strapped back in your chair like it's gonna hit me. But I think that's actually how a lot of people feel at the moment. I think a lot of people who watch Archaeo-Chat's videos as archaeologists or as people who are interested in heritage and history, they'll be aware of this as well. And I think really what we wanted to do this evening was just to acknowledge that it's happened, open up conversation, and I mean, we're getting on, I think, towards the end of this now, but crucially, I think this could be quasi-therapeutic even to actually to maybe hash some of this out in a way which isn't just
me listening to you ranting.
Yeah, you're listening to me rant all the way back from the airport. It's literally a case of hello, Liv, and then get in the car and then all the way home.
Missing the exit.
Yeah, that's before I even started the engine. But no, it's. I think this is an opportunity to talk about it, and also to actually maybe even get because actually, but one thing that I'm aware of is the fact that we're even in this group, we're also not representing the full spectrum of interests, which heritage and archaeology touches on, and anthropology, and then the broader social sciences, and then the broader sciences, and intellectual life, and then so I suppose what I would invite people to do is just to comment below, and we'll sort of try and maybe bring some of our thoughts back together. It may take a couple of months actually for things to develop to an extent where we can say more.
Yeah.
But I think certainly as a group we sort of felt it was important to mention and talk about it.
I would also want to say to the commenters to keep it civilized.
Yeah, keep it simple. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, I don't know. How can we end on a positive note?
There has to be a silver lining in it, right?
Yeah.
Someone.
I think you some more anthropology PhD students gonna have some things to write their dissertations about now.
Yeah.
International relations is now going to thrive.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's gonna be especially anyone in border studies.
Yeah, border studies, exactly. Yeah. Although, fun fact, Britain doesn't have enough trained negotiators, so we're going to have to employ some people from outside Britain to help negotiate. But anyway, let's put that hilarity off until another day. Thank you so much, guys, this evening. I know, Jeanette, you've just come back from a long journey, obviously, and you guys as well, giving up your evening. And we're going to go and have some lovely tea, because lovely Mrs. Soup is waiting around the corner with a frittata. Yeah, lovely. Are we allowed to eat that frittata?
So far.
Okay, that's not in the Brexit yet.
No,
okay,
no.
grand. Anyway, guys, as ever, until next time, do take care, and from all of us, goodbye.